Welcome to the Colors of Prog. This is season 3, episode 4. Anyone unfamiliar with what I'm doing here is it's a Podbean, YouTube, and Facebook channel for progressive rock. And I discuss and review progressive rock recordings from all around the world, past and present. That's it. So this time, I mentioned this in season 1, but I didn't go into it in depth. Prog exhibition. It's a box set, 7 CDs and 4 DVDs, all Italian. So, taking place in Rome in the fall of 2010, November specifically, there was a progressive rock festival. It only lasted 2 days, I believe, but it featured a number of classic Italian bands, RPI bands, rock progressive Italiano. Some of them are still active today. Now, the festival featured some newer bands and some reunions of lineups for bands who had not recorded in years or played together in years, decades even. Adding some spice to the musical sets were guest appearances from classic Prog-era musicians like Ian Anderson from Jethro, Tull, Thijs van Leer from Focus, David Cross, King Crimson, and David Jackson of Van der Graaf Generator. Now, it's unclear whether they had their own slots in the festival and joined in, or they were playing nearby and joined in, or if they flew to this festival to actually join these bands for their sets. It's this box set from Immaginifica. Came out in 2011, so it's referencing the performances and so on from the shows. So I'm going to discuss pretty much everything. Has a nice little illustrated booklet with a listing of the band members for the individual bands and the guests and what songs they played. And some of these are quite amusing to me because the guests play usually a well-known hit they played on with their original band. This is for the guest. It looked like PFM were the main headliners of this festival. They have the longest set, apparently, followed by Banco del Mutuo Soccorso, who have also a long set, but not as long as PFM. So, let's get going. Some of these bands, the newer ones specifically, they only have a taste of their music. 1 or 2 songs, maybe 3 or 4, not much. So Sinestesia, a band formed in 1997, and which so far released 2 CDs on PFM leader Franz Di Giocchio's label Immaginifica, which is the same label that released this. They come out first. Their sound is progressive metal with an emphasis on rock and progressive roots. Alberto Brevin, who plays with Sinestesia, would later join PFM after the band's 2009 CD, their second one, The Day After Flowers, and then eventually would replace David Longdon in Big Big Train after Longdon's untimely death. I mean, the band sounds good. their two songs are sung in English, and so it's progressive music with a bit of a metal edge to it. So that was Sinestesia. Next up is The Trip. The earliest version of pre-release music from The Trip, that band featured Richie Blackmore, believe it or not. That's true. The Trip are one of the Italian bands to combine folk, pop, jazz, and classical into a unique sound, to say the least. They released their self-titled debut, The Trip, in 1970, but split in 1973 after doing 4 albums. Arvid Wig Anderson, a Norwegian, played bass and vocals. Joe Vescovi, an Italian, who apparently lived in England for much of his life, plays keyboards, also sings vocals. Vescovi died in 2014, and Arvid Wig Anderson died in 2012, just 2 years after this appearance. Only the drummer remains with us today, and a new lineup featuring him released music in 2021, which is pretty surprising. I had more to say about the Trips. They have a nice mini set, but I did some research, and this is the first time the band had reunited in decades. And Arvid, also known as Weg, it's like a nickname, was in a serious accident, and it affected his vertebrae, and he was on medications and whatever for a long time. So he only started performing locally where he was living. So it was this festival was the first big time he got out there and rejoined the Trip. He appears, his singing's decent, it's strong, the vocals, but he appears unsure, and I couldn't tell. This is coming from the DVD portion of the set. All the full sets also are on DVD too. And I couldn't tell if he was afflicted by the painkillers, or maybe inebriated, or stoned, or maybe he was in pain. At some point in time, it looks like he walks off the stage, and the song's not done yet, and it's covered by the another guitar player. So I thought that was interesting. He does come back out for the encore and applause. So, The Trip. Next, we have a band I've discussed often, Maschera di Cera, the Wax Mask, Mask of Wax. His often discussed band is led by Fabio Zafanti, one of many Prog-related groups he's a member of. And the singer here was Alessandro Corvaglia. And most of the set was from their 2009 album, Petals of Fire. Quite nice. If you're not familiar with Wax Mask, Mask of Wax, they're a pretty cool band, and they released a revisionist work of Leone, Sfalona, and Serona in their own style. So they're definitely worth checking out. They recently released another CD in 2021. Next we have is Aldo Tagliapietra, Tony Pagliucci, and Tolo Morton with David Cross from King Crimson. Since the original Le Army lineup of Aldo, Tony, and drummer Michi Di Rossi would become off and on fractious, they reunited. Aldo Tagliapietra and Tony Pagliucci with a highly revered guitar player named Tolo Martin, who appears on the Army's Smog Magica album, 1975. Also joining them is violinist David Cross, who appeared on the King Crimson albums Lark's Tongue and Aspic and Starless and Bible Black, and later released live King Crimson recordings from that era. It's a set of Leer Army highlights and Exile from Lark's Tongue and Aspic, the King Crimson song. It's quite good. It's great for those Leer Army fans because it's got that sound, and band members rarely get together for a variety of reasons. The much discussed PFM, which I said appeared to be the festival headliners, that band was formed in 1970 and is still active today. They're joined by Ian Anderson on his arrangement of a Bach tune, which is totally in tune with the music of PFM, because I always believed that in a way they were influenced by Tull, one of the many bands they were influenced. One of them was Tull. And the whole classical symphonic Prog sound. Anderson also joins them on My God from Aqualung, which was released on written for Aqualung, but played on earlier live dates for the 1970 benefit tour. So although My God appears on Aqualung, they had written it and recorded it before they went on tour for benefit, and so they started playing it live before it actually showed up on the studio album of Aqualung. I know, what a handful. Perferia del Mondo, Periphery of the World, is next. Formed in the late 1990s, but influenced by classic Italian rock bands like Banco and PFM. And members of those bands would often guest on the 4 CDs recorded and released between 2000 and 2006. That's for Periphery of the World. In 2013, they released a lot less prog-related, more heavy-sounding record. Their sound is less symphonic, prog, more of a hard-rocking sound, but it's nice to hear something different. Nuovo Raccomandata Ricevuta Ritorno, formed in 1972. They released their debut album on Mondo Cristallo that same year. And Il Pittore Volante, their second album, came out in 2010. So the first album came out in 1972. Their second album came out in 2010. Talk about a long passage of time. On their set, they're joined by Claudio Simonetti from Goblin and Osanna singer Lino Veretti. And that's a quite nice. Also, there's a third guy, Thijs van Leer, of Focus, guests on 3 tunes, including Focus House of the King. And it's nice to see Claudio Simonetti playing keyboards while Thijs van Leer is playing his flute, and then Thijs jumps on the keyboards and Claudio steps back because he's like, this man, I'm here because of his music. A revamped lineup with the original singer and bass player released an album called In Rock in 2019. Next we have Abash. Abash combines a wide swath of musical influences, including African, Middle Eastern, and Oriental melodies, with Italian rock and folk. Singer Anna Marita Luccheri has an expressive voice, and between 2001 and 2006 they released 3 albums. They released a reunion album in 2014, Il Viaggio Ritorno al Sud. So that was Abash. Very nice sound, very smooth sound. Next we have Osanna. Another Italian band I've mentioned in the past released their first album in 1971. While not prolific, 9 studio albums in 20 years, not including 3 live recordings, they have been very influential, especially on some UK bands that toured Italy in the early 70s, including Genesis. Osanna collaborates with Van der Graaf saxophonist and flautist David Jackson on a 2009 album called Prog Family, and Jackson joins them for the show, as well as singer and keyboardist Gianni Leone of Balleto di Bronzo, which released the YS album in 1972. So this thing is star-studded. I mean, it must have been amazing to be there. Finally, we have co-headliners Banco del Mutuo Soccorso. And the reason why everyone refers to them as just Banco is because it's a tongue twister, much like PFM. And Banco del Mutuo Soccorso actually translates to the Bank of Mutual Relief. Why the band chose that name, I know not. Along with PFM and Leone, they are considered one of the top 3 best legendary Italian prog bands, and one with 2 keyboard players, including still active member Vittorio Nocenzi and the late Francesco Di Giacomo, on a distinct vocal sounding, with a distinct vocal sound, echoing Italy's prominent opera and folk heritage, as well as the wailing sounds of early British hard rock singers, the likes of Robert Plant, so on. Originally, John Wetton of King Crimson in Asia guested with Banco, but that's not included on the release. It's stated due to copyright reasons. I'm not quite sure what that was about, but it's actually written here in English, so that we know. So we have 7 CDs of music, as I discussed, as I mentioned, and then there are 4 DVDs, including the box set, and it has all the music that's on the CDs. PFM, of course, big band headliner, they get 2 CDs worth of music, nice long set. So this is, if you could track it down, it's highly worth the investment, and I highly recommend it. It's rare to hear. All the performances are really good. The Trip one, as I mentioned, is a little odd due to the singer, but highly recommend it. I mean, you don't even have to be a huge fan of Italian prog or RPI to see some of these legendary guests playing with these Italian bands. Great to see. You know, it helps to see the DVDs, which I watched after I listened to all the music on CD, because it gives you a different focus on what you listen to, and you can watch them. And it was well recorded, too, for DVD. I don't think there was a Blu-ray release. This is probably before or just about the time HD was coming on. So anyway, Prog Exhibition, 40th anniversary of Musica Immaginifica. I'm going to discuss the show they had the next year in 2011 later on. But for now, that's that one. Thank you for listening and watching. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to jump on the Colors of Prog Facebook page or on the YouTube. You can comment there or on the Podbean podcast. Have a great day.